And then I asked her, Saloni said, turning her cup in her hands, the real question, the only one I went for. I asked her, do you still make? With your hands. My Playful Wife, Episode 43, The One Who Sold, written by Mia. On the 10th day of the fortnight, Saloni did the bravest and most sensible thing available to a person standing at a fork in a road. She went to find someone who had already taken the turning she was afraid of, to see where it actually led. Her name was Devika. She had been, 20 years ago, the maker Saloni trained under for 2 formative years and had admired, with a particular fierce admiration of the apprentice, ever since a maker of real gift, hand-cut, small, true, exactly the kind of maker Saloni had become. And then, about a decade back, Devika had been offered an empire of her own by men very like the man across our wide pale desk, and Devika had said yes. She had scaled. Her name was on shops now, in airports, on a perfume. You could buy a Devika scarf in a duty-free in a country she had never set foot in. She had become precisely the large thing Saloni was being invited to become. And so Saloni called her, after 10 years of mostly silence, and asked if she could come and sit with her for an afternoon, and Devika, who understood instantly and completely why the call was coming, said, "Of course, child.
Come.
I have been expecting some version of this call from you for years." Saloni went alone. This was right. Some mirrors you have to look into without your husband standing behind you, and anyway it was not my future being auditioned. She came home in the evening changed in the way she comes home from the deep places changed, quiet and full, and across our own table in our own light. She told me what she had seen, and I am setting it down as she gave it to me because it is the most useful thing anyone said in the whole long fortnight. Devika, she said, was magnificent. That was the first surprise, and the disarming one. Saloni had gone, I think, half hoping to find a cautionary tale, a hollowed-out woman, a sellout gone cold, a warning she could take comfort in and refuse the empire against. She found nothing of the kind. Devika was sharp and warm and successful and entirely herself, presiding over a studio the size of a small factory, 100 people, a real institution, and she was not hollow at all. She was, Saloni said, clearly good at the thing she now did, which was not making but building the house that makes the thing, running it, steering it, growing it, and she did it with the same intelligence she had once brought to the cutting table, only pointed now at an enterprise instead of a bolt of cloth. She had not sold her soul. She had changed her medium. The thing she shaped now was a company, and she shaped it well and took real joy in it. So much for the cautionary tale. Saloni said she had sat there in Devika's vast, bright office feeling the ground move under a thing she had been quietly certain of the whole fortnight, that the woman who scaled would, on inspection, turn out to have lost something visible, some warmth or soul or selfhood you could point to. It is a comforting belief, that one, the belief that the people who take the big road must secretly be diminished by it. And I think most of us who do not take it cling to some version of it, because it lets us feel that our smaller lives are not merely smaller, but somehow purer. Devika, simply by being undiminished, took that comfort away and left in its place the harder and more honest thing, that the road does not diminish you. Only choosing the wrong road for yourself does. And then I asked her, Saloni said, turning her cup in her hands, the real question, the only one I went for. I asked her, do you still make? With your hands. Do you still cut? She let the question sit on our table the way it had sat on Devika's. She said no, not in years. She said she could not remember the last time she had cut a garment with her own hands, that there was no time for it, that her hands were full of other work now, signatures and decisions and people. And I watched her face when she said it, because that was the whole reason I'd come, to watch her face when she answered that exact question. Saloni paused, and here is the thing I did not expect. Her face did not fall. There was no hidden grief in it, no secret mourning I could point to and say, "See, there it is, the cost, the thing she lost." She said, "I don't make any more the way you'd say I don't live in that city anymore. A fact about a former life, held without pain. She does not miss the hands. She told me so directly when I pushed. I thought I would mourn it forever, and for a year or two I did. And then I discovered that I had been a maker who secretly always wanted to build the house more than she wanted to stitch in it, and that the cutting table had been, for me, a stage I was waiting to graduate from. The hands were never my true thing. The reach was. I just didn't know it until I had the chance to find out." And that, Saloni said, was the moment the whole question turned over and showed her its other face, the face she had not been able to see from inside her own fear. Because she had gone to Devika carrying a simple shape, that the hands are the true thing, that scaling kills the true thing, that the empire is therefore a temptation to be resisted by anyone who loves the true thing. And Devika, gently, without arguing, had dismantled the simplicity of it, not by denying that scaling kills the hands. It does, she was clear about that. The hands go, that is real, but by revealing that for some makers the hands were never the true thing in the first place. That there are, Devika said, two kinds of maker, and they look identical at the small scale, indistinguishable, both bent over the same cutting table doing the same beautiful work, but they are secretly different species, and the difference only reveals itself when an empire is offered. One kind is a maker of the hands. For her, the cutting, the touch, the 2 in the morning communion with the cloth is the thing itself, the whole point, the place the meaning lives, and to take her hands off the cloth is to take her life off its center, and no amount of reach will fill the hole where the making was. The other kind is a maker of the reach. For her, the hands were always only the means, the tool she used because it was the tool she had, and the actual thing she was after, underneath, was the reach, the stranger met, the work multiplied out into the world. And for her the empire is not a loss of the true thing, but the long-delayed arrival of it, the medium finally matching the size of the ambition that was always quietly there. Saloni said it was like being handed a pair of spectacles she had not known she needed. For her whole life, she had carried a single picture of what a good maker was, small, hand-bound to the cloth, suspicious of scale, faithful to the touch, and had measured herself and everyone else against it, and had felt, dimly, that to want bigness was a kind of impurity, a failure of artistic nerve. Devika had quietly replaced the single picture with 2, and in doing so had freed Saloni from a judgment she had not even known she was making. That one kind of maker was nobler than the other. They are not nobler or baser, Devika had said. They are different. And a great deal of unnecessary misery is made by people spending their lives trying to be the nobler kind when they were born the other one. And both are real, Saloni said. That's what undid me. She wasn't telling me scaling is fine, or scaling is death. She was telling me it's neither in the abstract. It depends entirely on which kind of maker you are, and that the tragedy, the only real tragedy, is choosing the wrong road for who you actually are. A maker of the hands who scales spends the rest of her life in a beautiful empire with a hole in the middle of her, where the cutting used to be. And a maker of the reach who stays small out of some borrowed idea about purity spends the rest of her life in a lovely little room, secretly suffocating, watching her real ambition die unlived because she was too principled or too frightened to admit she wanted to be big. So she gave it back to me, Saloni said. The question. She wouldn't tell me what to do. She's too good a teacher for that. She never once told me what to do at the cutting table either. She only ever made me see more clearly what I was already doing. She just said, "The question is not whether the Empire is good or bad, Saloni. The Empire is good. The question is which kind of maker you are. And only you can know that, and you must be very honest, because the fear will lie to you in both directions. Your fear will tell you to stay small and call it integrity, when really you are a maker of the reach who is afraid of her own size. Or your fear will tell you to go big and call it courage, when really you are a maker of the hands who is afraid of being thought a coward for staying true to her own scale. Both fears wear noble clothes. You have to get underneath the clothes. You have to know in your hands which one you are, and then have the nerve to be it, even if it is the smaller, less impressive kind, even if the world claps for the other one." Saloni went quiet a long moment, in our lamplight, with that on the table between us. And then she said the thing I'll keep, she said. She took my hands, my actual hands, across her enormous desk, and she looked at them, the chalk in the creases, and she said, "I let go of mine without much grief, because they were never where I lived. The question you have to answer is whether yours are where you live. Because if they are, child, if the cutting is your true thing and not your stage, then no empire on earth is worth the hole it will leave, and you must refuse it, and you must not let anyone, including the frightened part of yourself, call that refusal small. And if they are not, if you are like me, and the hands are your means, and the reach is your hunger, then you must take the empire and never look back, and not let some sentimental idea of the artisan keep you small when you were built to be large. I cannot tell you which you are, but I can tell you that you already know, in the hands themselves, and that the whole work now is to get quiet enough to hear what they have been telling you all along." I did not say much that night listening to her. It was not a night for my words. It was a night for sitting at the edge of an enormous thing happening inside my wife and keeping her company while it happened. But I will record what I understood listening because it reorganized my own sense of the whole fortnight. I had been quietly assuming, I am ashamed of it a little, that the true thing was the small thing, that staying handmade was the noble choice and scaling the fall, and that the only question was whether Saloni would be wise enough to choose the small true road I privately hoped she'd choose. Devika had exposed the condescension hiding in that, the way it flattened my wife into a morality tale, the way it secretly served my own fear of the empire by dressing my fear as her virtue. The truth was larger and more frightening and entirely Saloni's, that there was no road that was the right road in general, that the rightness was not in the road but in the match between the road and the actual woman, and that I did not get to know any more than Devika did, which kind of maker my wife was underneath. Only she knew. Only she could find out. And the most loving thing I could do, still, was the same thing I had been doing. Keep my thumb off the scale, keep my fear out of her room, and trust her to hear, in her own hands, the thing only her own hands could tell her. Late, she went and stood in the doorway of the workroom, the small one, ours, and looked at her cutting table for a long time, and I watched her from the hall and did not follow. I think she was listening. I think she was holding her own hands up, in the dark, against the question Devika had handed back to her. Are you a maker of the hands or a maker of the reach? Is the cutting your true thing or your stage? Is this small room where you live or where you have been waiting to graduate from? And trying in the quiet to hear which answer went quiet and which kept talking. She did not say which, that night. I do not think she knew yet, not all the way down. But she stood in the doorway of the small room and looked at the table where her hands had made every true thing she had ever made, and something in her posture, some set of the shoulders I have learned over 20 years to read, told me that the listening had finally started in earnest, and that the answer Whatever it was coming. I made the chai. I did not ask. I have learned which silences to keep. There are silences that abandon a person and silences that accompany them, and the whole art, in a long marriage, is telling them apart and choosing the second. The abandoning silence is absence dressed as restraint, a man retreating into his own evening while his wife wrestles something alone 3 feet away. The accompanying silence is presence with the words taken out, a way of saying I am here, I am not going anywhere, I am not going to crowd this with my opinions, but I am awake beside you in it for as long as it takes. She could not have heard her own hands over the sound of my voice telling her what I hoped she would decide. So I gave her the other thing, the quiet that is not absence, and made the chai and let her listen. I wrote it in the 5th notebook while she slept, the question still open, but sharper now, honed against a living woman who had walked the road ahead. The one who sold. Saloni went to Devika, her old teacher, handmaid and true once, who took an empire a decade ago and became a name, shops, airports, a perfume, a scarf in a duty-free in a country she's never been. Went half hoping for a cautionary tale, a hollowed-out sellout to refuse the empire against. Found the opposite. Devika magnificent, sharp, warm, not hollow. She didn't sell her soul. She changed her medium. She builds the house now, shapes a company, takes real joy in it. Doesn't make with her hands anymore, and doesn't miss it. No hidden grief. I was a maker who secretly always wanted to build the house more than stitch in it. The hands were never my true thing. The reach was, I just didn't know till I had the chance to find out. The reframe, the gift, 2 kinds of maker, identical at small scale, secretly different species, a maker of the hands. The touch is the thing itself. Scaling leaves a hole nothing fills, and a maker of the reach. The hands were always only the means. The empire is the true thing finally arriving. Both real. Scaling isn't good or bad in the abstract. It depends which kind you are. The only tragedy is choosing the wrong road for who you actually are. The handsmaker who scales lives in an empire with a hole in her. The reach maker who stays small, secretly suffocates. Her real ambition dying unlived because she was too principled or too frightened to admit she wanted to be big. Devika gave the question back, too good a teacher to answer it. The question isn't whether the empire is good, it's which kind of maker you are. The fear lies in both directions. Stay small and call it integrity, or go big and call it courage. Both fears wear noble clothes. Get underneath them. The thing Saloni will keep. Devika took her chalk-creased hands and said, I let mine go without grief, because they were never where I lived. The question is whether yours are where you live. If the cutting is your true thing and not your stage, no empire's worth the whole. Refuse it and don't let anyone call the refusal small. If it's your means and the reach is your hunger, take the empire and never look back. I can't tell you which, but you already know. In the hands themselves, the work is to get. Quiet enough to hear what they've been telling you all along. My narrator's reckoning. Ashamed to realize I'd assumed the small equals true/noble and scaling equals the fall, and that my hope she'd choose the small road secretly served my fear of the empire dressed as her virtue. The rightness isn't in the road, but in the match between the road and the actual woman. Only she can know which kind she is. Keep my thumb off the scale. Late she stood in the doorway of the small workroom looking at her cutting table, listening to her own hands. Didn't say which yet, but the listening started in earnest, the answer coming. I made the chai and didn't ask. To be continued in episode 44. What goes quiet?
Simbolo di copyright mia.
All rights reserved. That was episode 43 of My Playful Wife. If this story is staying with you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus chapters are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.